Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man whose stout party of seven is to make an outpost for the glory of all of Keshimgodin.
Tim Longo.
Or whatever
mine is. Yeah, I didn't write it down.
Thing is called. Yeah. I wrote it down because I knew that was probably a thing that was going to show up every time you started a new fortress or outpost or whatever. So we are on our third episode. Talking about Dwarf Fortress. We have moved forward in time, in development time, I should say, not Dwarf Fortress time, to the most recent, which for me was, 50 or 51 or something. It was literally published in February, I think. So the most up-to-date version of the game. I'm still playing via the text-looking interface, which had a little bit of a snag in the tutorial because apparently that interface doesn't zoom currently. So there's a point where it's like, you should zoom. And I'm like, I can't zoom.
Yeah, mine didn't either. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, it's because you're the text thing, and I was like, I kept trying. I was like, control and whatever, like, am I doing this wrong? But I ended up looking it up and I was like, oh no, that just doesn't work with the glyphs. It works with the graphical interface. And so they took it out, but missed it in the tutorial. So
got it.
Pretty minor issue in the grand scheme of things.
So as a quick aside, but we'll, I guess, talk about this in the next episode, maybe. So is the visual version of Steam just this version, but with graphics? Like, is it, I guess it would be the same game, huh? Or
I think so. Wow. In fact, I think they're still distributing it this way. Like, that you can actually just flip over the graphics version if you prefer.
Oh, really? You can just turn it on and off?
Yep.
Oh, wow. That's brilliant. Wow. Okay. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's like playing like remember the Monkey Island remake?
Yeah.
The old, or whatever, or Grimm, or,
Yeah, the Halo remake did the same thing where you could turn
right,
off.
Exactly. Yeah, that's when we played. Yeah, so, I mean, it's just... I love that too, because you can actually go and say, "Oh yeah, this is what it looked like."
That's wild.
Yeah. But that's not really in this case. I don't think that's a difficult thing, right? Because it's just rendering different glyphs. I don't. I mean, it's not like this thing has a ton of rendering state changes. It's like you're picking from a bunch of colored entries in a texture lookup, basically. So whether that's a little picture of a dwarf or some other, like, I don't even know what the graphical thing looks like, but if it's that difference, I don't think is a hindrance to rendering. So
yeah,
it's not like some of those other things where it's like actually you have a whole different set of assets. In this case, it's like one asset, or whatever, however many texture pages they need for their glyphs.
And it's still 2D. Even with the layers we'll talk about in a second, and having seen some screenshots, it's they are it's tile based still, right? So they are just able to, I assume, swap every glyph for a tile essentially, and it's a very cartoony looking illustrated.
That would be my guess. I mean, if I were implementing this, but it's also just one of the things I was thinking about is like, I could work on a thing just like every, for a couple of hours every Saturday. And in 20 years,
think where you will be.
I might be someplace amazing, I mean, it's just because, obviously they've been working on this full time, so it's not, it wouldn't be quite the same, but it's just like, I think about where they started and how much was already there. I mean, of course, and they worked on it for 4 years, and just how far it's gone, and clearly a game that they have played all along. Of course, they've had a lot of people that are playing it and are interested in it, and they've had this community that's been supporting them all these years.
Oh man, and can you imagine that if the brothers have their own fortresses that they've had for
I have to assume
a long for all this time, like what those I wonder if they release like videos or something. That's amazing.
Yeah, that'd be super cool. We should. I mean, I'm very curious about a lot of things about this game.
I'm going to try. Yeah.
All right, good. Because I mean, it's. You always wonder, like, what just their choices. Like, what did they decide to work on and why? What is the path forward for them, and when has that path taken significant changes from what they thought it would be? I mean, I'm just dying to know.
Yeah.
Well,
and we talked about it last couple episodes, but to your point on like the amount of work they've been able to do over time, still, again, I think I said this thing last time, but the fact that we are able to play any of the versions before, and to, for our podcast to be able to play that first one and then play the one we just played, it is like, it is a very like present and clear example of iteration in video game development. Like you get to see how the sausage is made in that way, right? And they have been very open about it, right? So it's like it's all there, and so which is, you don't get to see that usually, right? You see the end product, and for a more like live game like a Warcraft or a shooter or something, an Apex, you maybe you were there throughout the time of the history of the game as a player, so you kind of got to experience it along the way, sort of. Fortnite probably is an even better example. But like, if you're playing Fortnite now and you try to think back of what it was in the beginning, it's like, you probably have a vague memory, but there's no like other than videos, record. I guess there's no real record of, you can't go back and play that.
Yeah, and you're watching a video, you don't know what it feels like to play it either.
No.
What's in the mind of the player. In this case, I mean, I initially jumping into this with all the like different window, like little buttons and things, I was like, oh man, this is overwhelming. Maybe I'll go back to the original.
Yeah, right.
Because I had them, I tried a couple times to place things without doing the tutorial. I was like, I should be able to figure this out. And then I finally was like, no, I'm just going to do the tutorial and just see what the idioms are, to interface with the game that I'm missing, like that I don't fully understand. And I got it pretty quickly. And most of the things mapped straight over. So most of it was actually pretty easy to get, but there was a block I had. I don't know what it was. I think they made something actually easier. Like you could just click on a dwarf in the world, and now you get the information. But before you had to like hit a key and then navigate around. And that was the part I was like, I don't know what to do to try to see what things are going on. Anyway. The point is, I mean, this is a game where you can, like, I literally can remember from last week the sorts of things I was thinking about while I was playing, and then the things I was thinking about this week, and like compare that. And one of the things I thought when I first was like, oh man, this is overwhelming, was like, am I going to have to play like one version a year from the last 20 years or whatever to understand, like to grok it, to be able to see. But I mean, the exciting thing is like you actually could go and just play every version and see what changed and see where the big changes are. And nobody does that kind of preservation in just history, of their games. There's no profit margin in it. So it's great, that, I mean, you can basically see that these guys are living their values, like that they think that's important.
Yeah.
And so they're just doing it. It's passion. They're not saying like, oh, there's money, we lose money on supporting this or whatever. I can't imagine that downloads are so much that they, that it's killing them financially or whatever. So they're just like, yeah, we'll just do it. We'll just, we have this kind of ethic around what we build, and we'll make those things available. It's amazing to me. So
the passion, like a passion project that they were able to keep going and then has a kind of a happy ending, if you will, or something. But and to the point of like the process of it, I mean, I guess what you're saying, and like, if I think about playing this week and the version we're playing, and I think about sort of the art swap, if you will, to the Steam version, I guess it makes sense, and maybe this is an obvious statement, that they've, from a production planning perspective, they probably knew they were going to Steam for a while. And so to build in the capability of swapping slowly with the glyph version to essentially lay the groundwork for that, and then hire artists to build the tiles. So, you know what I mean? Like, it's like they've sort of like they built into the way that they're building the current game the capability of then doing a graphical version. And that's like just such a smart, again, iterative way to think about progressing something that's been around for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the SDL version, the simple direct layer or whatever it is, somebody I think mentioned it on the Discord that it means something specific. I don't remember but anyway, the layer that the library that they're using for
the
Windows
GUI
management and rendering and all that stuff is, well, it's not even that, it's lower level. They built the GUI in this. But so that layer has been around in the game for at least 10 years. Like that they switched over to that like library and rendering differently than just like a pure text pure glyph render as they were doing before. So
maybe it was like a revelation in a way of like, oh, we've had this around for a while. We have this foundational aspect. What if we were to add art to it or something, because they already had the infrastructure. I don't know, like you said, there's a lot of fascinating questions around this because there isn't an analogous example out there that we could pull to, to say, it's just so unique. Like the whole story, the whole history is so it's like it brings up new questions that we haven't really been able to ask before.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. It really is. It's really a marvel. This I don't know. It's a gift. I mean, it's just one of those things where you're just like, how is this the thing?
Yeah,
I mean, a lot of the things around it, with the multiple versions, all the versions being available. I mean, it's just like nobody does that, and so it's just a part of what they've decided to do as being their gift to their fans and community, and Johnny come latelys like ourselves. It's
and we've talked about it with many of the games that we have series on, but it definitely feels like one of those yes games, right? Where because they had the sort of, they've given themselves the luxury of working on it for many years, and they don't have limitations on a production or launch schedule or whatever the reason, right? They've the slow and steady approach. They were able to say yes over a long period of time. And it's just like, and playing the first version and then playing what we played this last session, you could see like, what if we had a whole separate sub system for traps of different kinds? Or what if you could actually make books? Like, wait, what? No, don't, but it's like, yes, you say yes to all that stuff, and
and in many cases I probably say yes, not yet.
Right. Let's put
we're
on
still
the list.
Finishing something else, but let's put it on this huge list we have of things that we're thinking about. And that's when you are a yes game in that way. You just imagine just like a whiteboard somewhere with just dozens of ideas on it, and just like every now and again going through it and saying, oh yeah, you know what, we could do this. Now we built that other system, we could put this in there, or using that to inform the systems you build. It's like, here's a few things that if we had this, if we tracked and detected this, we would be able to do something with this, and these 4 things would come in pretty easily. And like, I think that there's there's a number of ways into sort of keeping a big list like that and being aware of it and what the game currently can support or might be able to support soon. You always have huge amounts of things that you can add kind of in a sort of fell swoop, and, we see that all the time in things that we work on. You add some system, it's like, oh wow, we can leverage this in so many ways, and in ways that we didn't think of when we built it.
Right.
And you end up using it in a lot of ways, and that's also super cool. So I think that's happening here, and because it's just a couple of people, I think they can keep more of that in their head at one time. Like they don't have to it's just kind of there, and they can kick it around and be like, hey, but what about this? And then if you gave me this, I could do these other things too at the same time. And, yeah, I have to imagine it's a virtuous circle in that way. So
yeah,
super cool. Well, let's talk about some of the big jumps in this version. We were talking before about, I mean, basically the various interface improvements and the tutorial as well. But what was the, for me, when I opened it and there was all these interface changes, like, oh no,
yeah,
I had a moment of panic of just like, oh, I thought I learned enough to play this game, and now I feel like I maybe didn't. But what was your experience, and what are some of those elements that really stand out to you?
Yeah, I think the first obvious one you just mentioned for me was really just the GUI itself, and though it still had, it's almost like they developed their own style of kind of visual style from the beginning, because it was the glyph based, symbol based look, and as they added in that that lower level stuff you talked about, and the ability to do mouse interface and kind of like a user interface / HUD almost, right? Similar to other building games, etc. Icons that are essentially buttons, right? But they're presented in a glyph kind of way. So, from a sim game perspective, one thing that I really appreciated immediately was not just that there was a tutorial, but that when I look down at the bottom tray of buttons, it's like, okay, there's a mining button, there's a stockpile button, there's the buttons that, having played the previous version, you had to navigate by hotkeys and menus. Now I just click on a thing and it does the thing, and it's still some fiddly bits with it, but they iterated toward a modern, essentially modern game UI, structures there. And then in the lower left, there's, another tray for like dwarf centric information. And then there's, and then on the top you have which is all the same placement in a lot of games like these. In the top, you have your resources and your dwarves and population and, things that I would expect to be there. So it was just like, to your point, like we came in with preconceived notions of, oh, okay, this is an opaque game where I have to like learn hotkeys and I got to figure out the flow of things, because it's like it's unlike anything else. It went from that to, oh wait, okay, yes, this is overwhelming and there's a lot of icons, I don't really know what they mean, but I get kind of instinctually get how it's been made more usable, and now I just have to learn what those icons mean. You know, and they even have pop-ups, right? When you hover over things, which is like huge.
Or you do something like you zone a room, to be a bedroom, and it pops up a little like zones are this, here's what a zone is, and you can say like, don't show me this again, but you might want to keep it on for a while because you're like, oh yeah, you know what? I don't fully get all the things I can do with zones. So let me just, they overlap. Like there's things that I get every time where I'm like, when would that come into play?
Right.
Do I want to make a meeting hall also a dining room? Is there, is that do you want to do that? And why? Or why not? And, maybe some rooms are sort of multi-use, like, your local rec center or library or something. It's like, this room could be a meeting room, but it could also be a yoga room, or whatever, so it's like, what is that how you do that, right? So and that's what a lot of those things end up being for me is direction. One of the things that, because of the earlier presentation and the overwhelm and not being able to see lots of options at once because of the paging and things there was, like I commented, there were times where I was like, I didn't even realize there were additional pages, on this menu or whatever.
Yeah.
Now that I can see more of that at once, it actually helps me with my own goal setting more, because that's probably, going to be the thing that's always the biggest problem for me in a game like this, like it was with SimCity, is like, I really need goals. For my leisure time where I'm just kind of like, I'm just going to hang for an hour and play a game. I need tell me what to do, because I'm not mentally engaged at that level where I want to plan, often. It's a little different for the cast, but when I, dive into a game like that, I think it's why I've stopped playing these, deep simulation games over the years, is just because I don't have the brain power. Yeah. I do a lot of strategic thinking and tactical thinking in my job. So I like, at the end of the day, I don't want to come in and like figure out what to do. I want to just like tell me to go there because that's where the quest thing is. Like, I get it. But a lot of the experimentation I did in the maybe 6 hours I played this latest version was driven by being able to see more of what the options were more clearly. And that was a huge help to me. It made it, it's funny to look at this game and say, wow, this is way more usable, but it really is, because aesthetically you wouldn't, looking at it from the outside, be like, well, it's more colorful, but I don't know, is it more usable? I wouldn't guess that looking at it, but actually playing it to the point of like the difference between videos and actually playing a game throughout. It's very, very much more playable in me. It's much more comprehensible to me because it's there. Like I can click on the things and see what they do. I can just have the game paused and go and see what are all these options. Like, oh, here's another work thing. I can go and look, a workshop or whatever here. I can go look what in the help area, like what is this workshop for, and I can work back from, okay, well, I need ash to make potash. Oh, there's an ashery. Okay. There's how do I make ash? Oh, I need a wood furnace. Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. And then do I have to do anything else? Nope. I'm good. Now I've got my chain of things to do. And I've been able to set myself goals as a result, because I knew basically I would tell dwarves to do a thing. They'd say, I can't do that thing.
Yeah.
It would say, I need, I can't fertilize this field, was the first, long chain example of this. And I would be like, oh, okay. Well, what do you need for that? I need potash. Okay. I go look up potash. Oh, okay. You make potash from ash. Great. So I tried, but I found that by telling somebody to make potash from ash, and they said, well, I don't have any ash. I was like, okay, great. Oh, there's an ashery. I just like kept where, or whatever. There's a furnace. I just kept making my way back the chain to accomplish the goal that came from a dwarf not being able to do a thing that was clearly presented to me. Yeah. So, those are great little chains for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Which led from the fact that you needed food.
I desperately needed food.
Which same for me. And then which then comes from the fact of survival, or or preventing your civilization from doing what happened to us in the previous version, where they just go mad and just kill each other. So it's like, it's funny. I didn't think about this until just now, but because we had that experience in the last version, there's this sort of like unspoken imminent danger, not imminent, but like long-term danger or whatever. There's like, oh, I know what could go wrong.
Yeah,
I know how this can go bad. So, oh shoot, they're almost out of food. Oh, I better fix that because this could go bad. Even though in this game it didn't happen to me because A, I guess I was scared of it. B, they probably retuned it so it's not as punishing. And
it felt less punishing.
It's more usable to get to food, to farm or whatever. So,
well, also, D, you learned from 2 previous sessions, right? And for me too, is like, I mean, I've already kind of thought a lot about how I organize what goes where and why, as I build things. Like all these things, like these storage types and stuff like that, are all near the entrance because I know I'm going to want to move things to the trade depot, so I don't want those things to be too far away. These things can be a little further away, but not too far away because, I don't want to, so I'm thinking a lot about just organization of the space. And I learned all that from just watching, like, oh yeah, okay, one of my resources actually is, dwarf hours, right? Is the time it's going to take them to do the things because they have to move from point A to point B. And that's purely just exposure to the systems. It's not,
nobody's told you.
Nobody's told me that. I just worked it out on my own. Like, oh, okay, I want my, my craft stuff probably pretty close to the entry, and I want my wood stuff pretty close to the entry. The stone blocks can be further in. I just kind of started making these assumptions, for storage. And they're like, I want the food stuff to be not too far from the cook in the dining room. It becomes like that kind of, there's certain types of like board games that do this as well, where you're like, it's a strategic building of a space, with hex tiles or something like that. And you are making the same sorts of decisions in a more turn-based way. But you're like, oh, well, if I put this next to this other thing, it maximizes those things in a clear board game fashion. here those rules are not as clear, but you can intuit them pretty quickly. And that's pretty interesting and exciting to me, of like, you're really making those trade-offs constantly for yourself, but they're just purely motivated by what you've learned and what you're willing, what trade-offs you're willing to make, and that's super cool as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah, that it's naturally coming to you to do that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not forced on you. Yeah. Another category that we talked about in pre-show that I'll throw out, that I think when we talked about it last episode of what we were hoping to get from a new version, I think one of the things that I said was more in-depth understanding of individual dwarves, sort of like state and attitude and, and story and things like that. Or maybe you said, I forget which one of us said it, but it came up. And immediately now, not only is it more usable, but like, like you said in pre-show, clicking on a dwarf brings up that, kind of like everything you'd want to know about the dwarf in a much more easily digestible, but also very like quick and present manner. And that's like a huge deal. In fact, they even have like, with the glyphs, they've figured out a way to do tabs on that page. You can you can click on tabs, like simulates tabs, even though it's just a bunch of, hashes and pipes and things from the keyboard. And so
pipes and backslashes and underscores and whatever. Yeah.
It's so funny.
That's very common though. In like, we've joked about like links and other, text-based browsers and things like that. I mean, those were all things that were present in those, like if you used, what's it called? I can't remember. There was like a library, like legal lookup thing that looked a lot like some of those things as well.
Oh yeah. Back in the
LexisNexis is what I'm thinking of. That had that sort of feeling.
Like the DOS based,
exactly. DOS or Telnet or
applications.
Yeah, they definitely have that feel.
Yeah,
for sure.
Which makes sense, right? That because it's been around for so long that they're, that they're inheriting that sort of mentality. But yeah,
well, it's also maybe an aesthetic they're comfortable with. I just I sort of envision Tarn Adams as somebody who's like, used to using, I don't know, early versions of Linux or Unix or something, and just was like comfortable there. And like, oh yeah. I like to do everything in Emacs. Why would you ever leave Emacs? I just get that sense.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, but I just love how much they've fleshed out the specific dwarven attributes and all the information about them.
Yeah. And I love the things that can happen in there. I mean, opening up a dwarf and finding out that he had fallen in love, and that he remembered fondly talking with his lover. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
I didn't. Dwarf Fortress After Dark, I guess. But I was really surprised, by that. And of course, then they were the ones who had the first dwarf baby, and I was like, whoa, like that didn't happen in my, earlier games. I mean, it may have if they hadn't all gone crazy and started killing each other. Might have ultimately gotten there if I'd, managed to grow food in time and not messed up my initial trade. But yeah, it's
Was that also the one that was possessed?
No, that's a different one. Totally different. Right. That was a late arrival too. I'm like, you came here just to get possessed and like start running around going mad. Ugh.
Funny.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening there with possession. That's a mechanic I don't know what I've done. Did I awake some spirit in the? Is that going to be the way my fortress goes down? Is that ghost is just going to go from person to person?
Right.
So I don't.
Well, I mean, as a tiny segue there to another topic that we didn't get to experience, but I forgot to mention in the pre-show on the world, because they still lean into, I think, at least somewhat into the creating of the world process. So you get to kind of like watch that happen and read what's being generated, et cetera. And so there's kind of this mystery and intrigue. But during my world generation, I caught something about a dragon, and so, the segue there for me and the possession and / maybe a ghost is, it's a dwarf fortress game. So I assume there's some, fantasy, / supernatural elements. And so it's just fascinating to me that would be a thing, right? That there's a point when dragon attacks, or you find a dragon, or like you have to deal with a ghost. And so that's like a whole nother layer of just like keeping a civilization going. But super exciting that, that's a possibility. And when you mentioned possession, I was just like, wow, what is, it's just, what does that even mean? Like, how do you deal with that? Do you need to then have an exorcist or something of some kind?
Right. That's my assumption. Like I've it's funny because I quite a number of turns ago, I dug a space where I was like, I'm going to put a temple here. Because it was near the meeting hall. It's right around the corner. I kind of have this area where I'm starting to build out kind of more social stuff, and migrating it deeper into the place, and like thinking, some of the rooms towards the front will probably become more like barracks or something like that. And so I was thinking ahead to that, but I never got a chance. It hasn't gotten built yet because I put down so many farm plots that my dwarves, so many of them raced down there because they were so large. I guess there's so much space to be dealt with, which is another thing that's a part of the game that I'm still grokking, is that, part of how you influence what the dwarves do is by having a lot of space that is for a thing. If you make a big space with tons of farm plots, there's a lot of farming work to get done. And so they're going to spend the time on that. Cause that's just an influence. You don't assign dwarves to that like you do. Well, you don't assign tasks to that, I should say, like you do with a lot of the crafts, the craft buildings, the workshops and things like that. So they are just seeing like
they're maintaining
huge fields, and they're like, oh, we got to get on that. And it just, because there's so many of them, that they all kind of went and did that. So I'm really curious to see what happens. Am I going to have just a huge amount of harvest? I've got a cook who's working full time, just making, easy meals. I've got I've got a still that's now just like constantly cranking out, I don't know, some kind of extract based drink. I'm not sure exactly what. I'm hoping to put in some beehives. I'm thinking that'll be pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I'm just, I've got to have some mead.
Yeah.
I love a mead, and I'm sure my dwarves will too, except for the possessed one, who I think's tastes have changed entirely. But yeah, so I've never gotten back around to that temple that I marked out the space for quite a while ago. I was like, this is going to be a big, impressive temple room, and just nope, not happening. So
yeah, there's other things to. Yeah, I mean, it just dawned on me as you were talking that you probably have already done, but it just occurred to me that I could build another staircase that goes down another level like that.
Oh, dude, I have hotkeys for 5 different levels right now.
Oh, geez, I didn't even think of it because they told you to go down from the surface, and I've just been building that out, widely.
Oh no, I kept digging down because I wanted to find someplace where it was good to grow crops, and it says like you want to be near the wall of the mountain but deeper. So I dug down until I found a level where they showed me water on the map, even though I hadn't dug to there. Yeah. And so because I could see the water, I was like, okay, I'll get near there. I won't dig to it, but I bet that's where the soil is, the good soil, or better soil. It's all clay, so it's not great. But it's clay.
I think I lucked out on the first level.
Yeah, you might have. You got lucky then, because I didn't have that. I had no clay floor on the first level. I think actually, I think the problem is I dug up the first time. I did the wrong direction staircase, and so I also made a ton of them for some. I made some mistakes were made.
You just kept going down.
But after that, I was like, I went down and down and down, and I think I have 6 hotkeys, because you can assign a hotkey to a screen. The function keys to be named screens that you want. So you hit the H key for hotkey when you're not on any other submenu, and it brings up your list of hotkeys, and the first one is your wagon. But you can just assign any one of them and click a little button that says this view is this hotkey. So
that's cool. And that's amazing.
Yeah, it's super neat. So I'm constantly just like tabbing around to make sure nothing untoward is happening on any of my maps. So that's
huge. Yeah.
It's been really enjoyable as well.
And then, to your point, we've kind of inadvertently kind of happened upon that topic, but the fact that from the last version to this version, there are elevation layers to the world.
Yeah.
is
and 100 of them
and huge. Yeah, right. It just keeps going. Yeah, just like holy cow, it's crazy. And for me, because I didn't find the hotkey thing, I'm just using the mouse wheel to scroll up and down and stuff. But as far as like from the old version, where it's like you needed to find a cliff face and that was the best way to dig because you're going into the side of the mountain to create a Moria kind of situation or what have you, which makes sense. But then they're like, well, dwarves can dig in any direction. Why do they need to go laterally? Like they should be able to go down, And so it's like, well, I'm in the middle of the wilderness. I'm just going to go down. It's like, of course you are. And then you just have a staircase, and then
or a ramp. If you want to have animals go down to a different level.
Oh, okay. Good
use
point.
A ramp.
Cows can't.
And then I think they can't use stairs. Cows they're not good at stairs. And then you can, I think there's a thing where you can do minecart lines.
Yes, I did find that. Yeah, you can make.
I saw that. I haven't done anything with that because I haven't built any mine cars or anything like that. I'm like, at some point, I'm going to be really deep in the mountain, and and I'm just going to have mine carts everywhere, like going up levels. I'm going to be thinking like Indiana Jones Temple of Doom stuff.
It really reminds me of Minecraft in that way too. That there's this sense of okay, I'm just going to go down, right, and then I can't imagine that they weren't influenced by Dwarf Fortress in that way, because
you mean the other way around? Dwarf Fortress wasn't. Oh, you mean
I mean Minecraft because Dwarf Fortress would have come out first.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And that this kind of general sense of it and voxel based and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, I mean, because it is, at least in Dwarf Fortress case, even though it's presented differently, it is very much like every tile is kind of whatever you want to do with it, right? It results. Yeah. You destroy a tile and it kind of becomes something that you can use.
Anyway. One of the things the tutorial talked about was that the lower you go, the better. But you get boulders and things like that, which are better. For some reason, like I don't understand why yet, but
okay.
So there's value in going down. That's why I started going down. Well, I also started going down because I wanted to find some soil. So I dig down, I dug down a level and then dug along, several long feelers of okay, well, what's over here and what's over here. And I was thinking if I don't find anything, it's okay because I can use those as the basis for zoning out those areas later. Later on, I'll be able to take these long lines that I've drawn on different levels and build rooms off of them. And build a, more space, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, that'll all work. And then finally I got to a level where it's like, oh, there's water. And that's also different because you didn't see the water on the map before.
Right. It would just flood.
It would just flood, right? You saw the water when you found it. And then you're like, oh no. And this, I saw it and it was like, oh, here's some stagnant pools. I was like, well, that's fine because the water's probably, around that is probably fertile somewhat, and that turned out to be true. But that was 4 levels down for me.
Yeah, I had a river and pools in my first level down.
Oh wow, okay, yeah.
So I lucked out. Yeah, in fact, I had to kind of build around the water because I was worried it would flood. So I had to nestle it in there. But I think I'm in a jungle again. So maybe maybe that has some.
I'm in a swamp.
Oh, okay. Well, then you would also have extra water, but.
Yep.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's just so. I mean, you just see where I think it's very exciting to be at a point, even just in the few hours that I've played, that, like you said earlier, that you can easily see where you can get hooked, and it is very much a sim in that way where you're the ye old one more turn or whatever it is, where it's not, as turn based.
Yeah, let me just get to this, this next goal.
Your own goal, right. And there's I just need one more room. I'm going to build that really quick, or
let me make sure I get another craft station up. I want even more bracelets. When I want to be so rich,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's just such a fascinating, and then the layers themselves. Oh, and then to go back to another subtopic that we talked about in pre-show that, I had a hard time, as I was telling Brett in pre-show, of parsing what the big difference was. But in this version, when you do designate something like, say, just a simple example, like a stockpile of wood or a stockpile of whatever, to see the dwarves so quickly act and then very, very clearly see them go from one thing to another thing, like wherever they are, and you just see it's like it is very much the ant farm, notion where it's like, okay, all of these little faces are going to stop what they're doing and they all go up top and they start collecting wood and putting the wood in the stockpile, right? And you see it happens quickly. They're very responsive, and you kind of it just, even though this isn't a direct control sim, it's more of the populace than the civ or whatever.
Right.
There's still gratification to designating that stuff and then having it actually, see it happen in real time.
It's pretty immediate. Like it just.
Yeah, they're like, sure. Yeah.
I think the tick rate is faster for one thing. I think
that might be
like the update rate, is a big part of that. Because it feels quicker. Everything feels quicker. And I do pause all the time because things are happening much. I mean, I was doing that before, but that was more of like, I need to pause and go read stuff.
Yeah.
And like figure out what this thing is going to do, or like figure out like how I need to respond to this challenge, like when the thing flooded. And in this case, I'm pausing often just so that I can visit my different levels and be like, okay, where is everybody? What's going on right now? Okay, a number of dwarves are sleeping, and here's a bunch of dwarves working in the farms. Good. Okay, that's all fine. That seems great. I haven't had any raccoon invasions or anything like this, in this game, so everything seems pretty good. But whenever it is running, it feels like it's running a lot faster.
For sure.
And that leads to that gratification of like knowing, like it felt like forever that a room would get carved out. And in the earlier versions, and now it's a dwarf will like change his mind about where's the important place to mine right now, which I used to be like, no, don't go over there. And I'd be way more methodical about mining as a result. And now, because it's a little bit quicker, I don't, even though theoretically it's actually the same, in the sense of like, well, the same number of simulation ticks are going to happen before that room's going to get done. Because it's faster, I don't feel as concerned about it.
Yeah.
In a way that I did before. So that immediacy, I do think really, really helps.
Yeah. And also as a related topic to that, the fact that they did this in the other version too, but I just didn't parse it as well, that they do a lot to try to make those glyphs clearly communicate the state changes that they are in. And the example we talked about before was when they go to a farm plot to plant, from doing whatever else they were doing, even the moving wood, they flip the glyph between their face and the thing they're carrying.
Yeah.
And so if you're watching them, you can see what they're doing, because they use the icon of the wood. Or in the plantings case, there's a seed, which is like a period, and it's like, oh, they're carrying a seed literally to the farm to plant it,
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, what is he doing? Oh, he's on his way to the farm because he's carrying a seed, or he's on his way to a wood stockpile because he has a log with him. So yeah.
Yeah, one thing I've missed so far, but it might just be because my dwarves are generally happy. So maybe it will happen if they become unhappy. But one of the things I saw a lot in the earlier versions of the game is that they would do that for the mental state when a dwarf was really unhappy.
Yeah.
And they would flip between the face and like a down red arrow is my recollection. So like this dwarf is angry, and he's about to get murderous. And I haven't seen that, but again, my dwarves, I think, are generally, except for maybe that possessed one who's gone mad, are generally happy. So they haven't, I don't think they've had the opportunity to show me that yet. And maybe I don't want to see it, because that would mean bad things were happening to my poor fortress. But that is the one thing I haven't noticed yet, is clear emotional state being done that
it's got to be there. It just must not. I feel like I've gotten a little indication of it, but I don't think it's as frequent. or maybe we just things haven't gotten bad for us yet. But I think that it's just not as frequently updating. Maybe like it'll go down arrow and then they'll go back to what they were doing or something. But
I'm really curious how a wider Steam audience will react to this because of some of these things as far as the goals go, but also a game where it's like losing is fun has been in their instructions since the first day.
Yeah.
Does the Steam audience react well to that? Is a question I have for myself. I mean, I feel like the graphical overhaul or whatever that they've done helps a lot with presentation and approachability, and I think it makes it a lot easier to use. But I don't think it makes the game easier in a fundamental way. So I imagine there's still going to be a lot of losing, quote unquote. Like
I think it's just extended. Yeah, we will lose. It's just how long will it take?
Yeah, how long will it take for our poor little hamlets to fail?
Yeah,
to thrive. Yeah.
I mean, we know that. I think we generally know the Steam version's done well. And you probably saw some of the articles, but there was an interesting, ironic and somewhat a little, I guess, tragic reaction to the game when it came out on Steam because so many people didn't know about its existence before that. And you probably know the game RimWorld or Ringworld.
I know. Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, and so it's it's a whole planet, essentially, and it looks different and stuff. But it was my understanding is it was inspired by Dwarf Fortress somewhat, but but it was the one that got to sort of Steam and the graphical version. It got there first, and so there was this weird backlash where people were saying that Dwarf Fortress was a clone of RimWorld, and it's actually the opposite. And the reason I bring that up is, there is clearly a community of players who loves these sort of like hardcore, difficult Sims, out there in the broader world of Steam and other platforms. And so I'm suspecting that, once you know what you're getting into, is it going to break out into like, Fortnite numbers or something? No, but
I wonder though if it reaches out to a different audience from that, like the Sims audience.
Yeah.
Sims 4 or whatever, know, and that and with the Sims 4, I think recently the base game is now free, so you could just get the Sims 4 on whatever platform, so there's maybe an influx of players there, and they're like, well, what else do I get to do where I do this with, because there's an inherently clearly, from the number of games that we've played that work on this level, there's an inherent interest in little computer people, as Will Wright used to call them. Right? There's clearly an interest in that, and there always has been, in computer games, and of course, it makes sense. It reflects us, right, in a direct way. Often, in different sort of systemic ways. Often they have to be approached from, but it's still like it's a reflection of us. I mean, what do people do when they start up The Sims? They make their house or their neighborhood, and people used to do that with Doom mods as well, which is a lot creepier, honestly. But I made my school, and then I went and shot everything. And I don't know if I get the issues that people may have with that. That's an aside. But there's clearly, it's a very graspable thing. Like the sort of life simulation aspect of these things is very clearly graspable to a wide variety of people. And so it might be just like finding your flavor. So there's the people who like the alien space world thing and want RimWorld. There's the people who want the like small collection of people and want the Sims. There's the people who just want to build a city and they want City Skylines or SimCity, whatever version we're on. And for people who want something medieval and really, really, really deep, Dwarf Fortress is probably their thing.
Yeah.
And that's a good place to be if you're a person who likes these sorts of games, for sure. And that's just the handful I kind of know off the top of my head to talk about. But it's exciting.
Yeah. And I was also happy to see at least my perception of some of the emergent stories that they might be trying to, because I told the cat story last time.
Right.
And in this case, a smaller version of that, because the cat wasn't there wasn't a cat causing trouble, but whether intentional or not, they still have some AI algorithms in there that, at least for me, created storytelling moments that I made up in my own head. And the example was, there was this child dwarf that kept going to the stone stockpile, but not they weren't working, and they weren't like going to bring them there. They were just like sitting there,
yeah,
like just on the stockpile. And it was just a kid, and I was like, I mean, are they there like playing with the rocks or playing make believe, or passing the time, or they, I don't remember. I didn't click on them to see what their attitude was, but or state of mind. But it just, it's like, oh, he's just, he's bored and he's over like doing some stuff, and playing with the rocks or something. And but it's like, there's some AI in there that had the kid go over to the stone pile, and it's definitely not working. So it's just such a funny.
What's going on in there?
It's just.
I mean, that reflects my own childhood. In the woods near where I grew up, there was like a midden, or where there was just like a pile of. There was a lot of brick. There were a lot of like old glass things. There's like old light bulbs, like old like 30s, 40s, 20s, glassware and things like that, of like little medicine bottles. I mean, they were all empty, all the bottles.
Like those antique bottles and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. But some of them were really small, and, we would just we'd get it. We'd bring them. My mom used them for decorations. We'd find some cool ones, and she would like cleaned them out and just put them in a space where she had tchotchkes. She had a ton of them for a number of years, but and then you'd find the light bulbs. You were like, well, I'm not taking this home because I'm going to throw it, because they were vacuum, so they'd make this cool noise when they'd crash or whatever. So basically, that's what that kid was doing.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm playing in the rocks. Because certain types of brick will calcify basically to chalk based on what's in them, what the calcium content is. And we used to go and we'd just like find pieces of calcified brick and just draw all over the other brick, that was in this, midden. It's super, it was probably not a very safe place to be. There were also metal things, like, and I hope we had our tetanus shots or whatever, but yeah, that's what your little dwarf kid is doing.
Yeah, I think so.
While it grows its beard. You wanted to talk a little bit about the trade, and maybe then we'll go and do a couple of emails real quick.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, the trade, I was able to have more time to get into the trade depot. I built one because the last time I wasn't able to figure that out. But, the two quick points there. One, there's the trade loop, and at least at this stage of the game, because I'm sure that this happens in other ways later, even to the degree of like battles between other groups. But right now, like, our interaction with the outside world is these trade routes that come in of these different species of humanoids, and they have like a light dialogue system, sort of, where you're like progressing through and they're asking you questions and things. And then also they leave you with a task for the next season to give you like a goal, or almost like a quest, even though they don't have a quest system, of building, basically a quest within the confines of the game and the systems in the game, of building something that if you build that thing and they come back the next season and you have it, then you'll get, extra, they'll pay extra for it. And so I just thought it was very fascinating that they, it's sort of like, that's the, to your point on goals, it's like, that's the goals coming to you, and you have to kind of like, host the trade caravans that are going to be coming. And it gives you a sense that there is an outside world out there, and that there's more out there, and that there are trade routes out there, and that I'm sure that all of that is simulated, and that if you were to go to another town, maybe, and that caravan might be at that town, after they leave your town. So, it's a brilliant way of giving that sense of a larger world, where there is a civilization more advanced than yours out there someplace, coming in and asking you for goods, and you can get goods from them, especially when you look at the list of what they have to offer. And even the trade depot itself, like, it has all the icons on it, and it's like shifting around, and it's like, wow, there's all this stuff here, So they really fleshed that out.
I think what you might need a broker for is to figure out, like, one of the things I found in that interface that was interesting was, like, I would go and be like, I click on a bunch of things that I would need, and you think of like I don't know, to pick a game from the pod, like Fallout, the original Fallout, like you would do that and it'd be like, well, that's worth this many bottle caps. And so then you'd have to try to make up that many bottle caps worth of stuff on your side and trade them, right? Yeah. But in this trade interface, and I think it's because we don't yet have brokers, it doesn't tell you. I mean, it tells you what the value of everything is on their side and what the value is of everything on your side. But I had to do the math myself. I had to add up like all the things that I was like going to buy, which was like, some meat and some seeds and I forget what else, a couple other things, maybe some leather. So I had a bunch of things that I was going to buy. And then on my side, I had a ton of different things I could sell. And but I was like, wait a minute, I don't know if this is equal. Where do I see if it's equal?
Yeah.
And I ended up just doing the math on both sides. And I think it's because I don't have a dwarf who's going to do that work. Right. And I was like, that's amazing. What a weird thing. Like to take just a usability thing. Right? I mean, because any of those games could have been that way. I mean, Fallout could have just said, well, here's the list of things and you figure out how much that is worth.
Yeah.
They
made a system out of it. Yeah,
they made something out of it.
Yeah. I did make a broker. I went to that. That's why I was in the administrators menu.
Oh, okay.
And I turned somebody into a broker as well. And then I did request them to come to the trade depot, but I didn't get far enough in to see what they were doing.
What would happen?
Okay. Yeah, but mainly because I think I got an alert that said, or no, it was on the money panel or whatever. They were like,
it's on some panel.
If you want more money, you should get a broker or something. So,
right. Yeah. I might do that for the next one because I'm going to have all those bracelets to sell.
Yeah.
I want to get the best possible price. Yeah.
Well, speaking of which, we're going to play, are we going to play the Steam version?
We're going to play the Steam
version.
Yeah. We should definitely throw, our shekels their way. This is,
for sure.
They should see some from us. I'm super interested in seeing that, and that'll really be the shift where we go to the graphical version. Even though, like I said, I think fundamentally it's the same.
Yeah.
Right? In terms of what they're actually doing. But I'm curious to see how they make that transition in terms of how they communicate things and what happens to the experience for me. Whether it makes it more parsable or not, I could see it going either way, whether I feel like it enriches my experience or I want to switch back to the text, or the glyphs. So I'm really curious to see that. I think for a wider audience, it'll make it more approachable just because it'll look more like a Farmville or something like that. Like it'll look more representational. Right.
Yep.
And of course that's, it's interesting to see them doing that because that's the trade-off, right? I mean, I was thinking as we were talking that, you were talking about, are these caravans somewhere else in the world and have they gone there and, could you go find them? And I was thinking, well, in Skyrim you could, right? But because of fidelity of presentation, Skyrim necessarily simulates less, right? And because if you have to represent everything at a certain level of fidelity, that's the driving cost, and here, because their fidelity is low, just having glyphs for everything, they actually can simulate a lot more, because the cost to actually show that thing in the world is low, relatively speaking. But if you actually have to animate a character doing the thing, your cost for anything that you simulate is way, way higher, because some person has to work on that for 3 days or longer, depending on what it is, and so your simulation boundary of what you want to simulate necessarily becomes shallower, because the cost of anything you add to it is that much higher. And so I'm really curious to see what happens to this game as they've moved to a different fidelity, whether that slows them in any way, or have they chosen, because I've not really seen much of the game in the graphical style. I was trying to look at a couple of images while you were mentioning it earlier. So I don't know what kind of cost that has imposed. So I'm curious, to see whether that makes them slow down, or makes them have less simulated stuff, and whether what that impact has on them. So I'm super curious about it.
Well, it's also interesting because the game has been in development for so long that they've essentially, what is the technology curve called? It's that guy's name. where each processor
Moore's law.
Moore's law. So there's almost like a Moore's law for the game where they're, like they can escalate. Yeah. They can escalate what they can simulate based on Moore's law in a way, because they can, it's like, okay, well now the CPUs are at a fidelity where, or at a speed where they can do more. So let's up the ante again, and they can could potentially keep doing that and still maintain the depth of simulation if they wanted to, maybe.
Yep. Yeah, it's likely possible. We'll certainly see. I'm very curious. It's amazing to me, we're both people who've shipped quite a number of games, like have worked on a ton of games or whatever, half a dozen to a dozen or whatever. And to think of these two guys working on the same game for 20 years, I mean, it's not something I personally could do. I'm far too fickle. I like to try new things, but I admire them for it, and it certainly resulted in something super interesting that you can't really find anywhere else. So,
yeah, anyway, absolutely.
All right. Well, so that's what we're doing next week. Let's now turn to just a couple of emails. We have a bunch, and I'm still catching up. There's even one that has a singing review. But it's a very obscure song from Flight of the Conchords that I have to go back and listen to a couple dozen
which
times.
One? Or you want to say?
I don't want to say, mostly because I can't remember the name of it.
Is it Sugar Lumps?
It's the one about when he meets a girl at a party or something, and he's like, "You're the best looking girl at this party," or whatever.
Business Time? Is that Business Time? No. Yeah, no, I know the one you mean. I know the one.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can see him singing it, but I can't remember the exact.
Yeah, that's a pretty obscure example.
It's a very obscure, and it's a very detailed song. There's a lot of lyrics, so I don't know. I have to give myself lots of honey and lemon over the next week. But go ahead and tackle this first email. These were sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. I have a couple things to say about this email. One is, it is just the first two parts of a very long email. And I think it might have been the second email. I'm so sorry, because Colin the Shots here had previously sent in an email about our first 100 episodes. I'm not sure. Because he sent in his going back through old episodes and asking us questions. So I've snipped out just the first two parts of this email, and we'll read subsequent parts later, because each one of them has a question, and we'll be here for another hour if we tried to address his one email all at once. Because there was,
this be a whole nother series where we're just dealing with.
So it's just Colin's, a series dealing with Colin's emails.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
That's fair. Yeah. Well, so if Colin has the 1 through 100 emails.
I'm not sure. I have to. I already replied to him and said, "Oh, hey, if this is a one in a series, I missed it. I'm sorry." I don't think so. I think this is actually the first one. He started going back and listening to other things, but especially interviews. But I could be wrong, and so I was just like, "Hey, I'm sorry if I missed it." So I'm trying to. I apologize to anybody whose emails went into spam. I know that one with the singing was in the spam and was like, "I'm sending this to you for the third time." I'm like, I'm so sorry. So I forget sometimes that not everybody's email gets through to us, because we do get a lot of spam. Anyway, go.
Okay, subject, hitting the mail on the letterhead. Hello, Brett and Tim, from Colin the Shots, Togus.
If that is your real name.
If that is your real name, that's pretty good. Colin the Shots. Love it.
Yeah.
Episodes 1 through 200. Okay.
Yes. Yikes. Not all at once in this email.
Okay.
We're reading tonight. Yeah.
Wow. Just wow. He says, you guys improved your audio and even changed your theme song. Really cool seeing this cast evolve. I finished listening to the Diablo series' interview with David Brevik and was simply inspired. I actually went back and began listening to all the interview episodes for games I haven't played, and it was the best decision. These interviews are such a perfect example of why I'm transitioning into the game industry. I feel like I owe a lot of my life and longstanding relationships to video games, and your podcast is making me understand that much more. I would love to leave a review to this effect somewhere, but I don't have any Apple products and generally listen to you on Spotify, which doesn't seem to allow reviews, in Canada at least. One last thing. My son Asher was born 6 months ago, and it's funny how songs, music stimulate memories, but I believe that I'll catch up to your current episode by his first birthday. Suffice it to say, your cast will forever unlock memories of my kid's first year of life. No pressure. Getting back into the episode summary response thing I decided to do. I'm sorry these are getting longer, but it's your fault for being inspirational. This time I'll include questions with each game summary. Wow. Nice. Okay, I will continue. So this is, thank you, Colin, for that first section. So this is episodes 138 to 141 for GTA 3. I could not finish this game when it came out for reasons you point out in the game, and I actually listened to these episodes mainly because the email wrap-up for this series that occurred during Pokemon Red and Blue. These seem to be some of the most divided episode emails date, and I'm going to hazard a guess as to why. I love listening to you guys, but whenever you're about to play a game that's one of my favorites and neither of you have played it before, I kind of get nervous. You should. I think people will always have rose-colored glasses for games from their youth, even though there may be very questionable content that I had not considered when I was 10 years old. There's this glass-shattering effect of pointing out something that you can never ignore again, like Kojima's statement of women, which I hadn't considered in Metal Gear Solid. Treatment of women, which I hadn't considered in Metal Gear Solid until you rightly touched on it during these episodes. What's a game that you used to love or really enjoy but can no longer return to for these types of reasons? That's the question.
That's the question, yeah. Yes.
What is one of those games? Colin, The Shots. James, Tiberius, Togus. So, wow, good. Excellent.
Very involved. I was only able, I read this earlier and I was only able to think of one kind of off the dome. I mean, there's a lot of games that fit into this mostly in the advertising materials because the graphics on a lot of games weren't that great. But I think of I played a lot of arcade games, as I know you did too, when I was growing up in the 80s. We'd go to the beach in the summer and it's like, that's where you would go and you play arcades for 2 weeks and then go home. And one year Dragon's Lair came out. And I thought that was just some of the most impressive, like the game design was nothing. There's no game design. The game design was, basically you push different directions on your DVD controller. Is pretty simple as far as that goes, but just the ability to have animation play and switch between failure and success states and in real time or whatever was the fun. Like, I mean, they had, I don't know if they, if this was just something they rigged up, but I feel like the thing also had like a TV export, so you could actually see somebody's game on another screen above them, because often there were people like surrounding the person playing, trying to see the screen, right? And so like you could actually, there's a TV hanging on a, TVs are a lot heavier then, but on like a shelf or something above it, and like you could actually see what was happening. And I just was so taken by the cartoon, like, and just being able to see a cartoon. But now you think about that game, you're like, wow, I mean, literal damsel in distress, and, of course the simplicity of the game as well, right, is another reason, like it would not hold my interest for more than a moment now. But at the time I was totally taken by it. I mean, it was just so amazing. I mean, it was like the leap in graphical fidelity from, say, I don't know, Tron or something, that I was playing a lot of at the same time, that might've come out a year or two before, but just the difference in those two things was so huge. I was like, oh, that's super cool. I want to play that. And, I'm not usually a graphics, like graphics is not normally the thing that draws me into games. Certainly as we've gotten further in, in generations of console hardware, it's like I'm seeing less and less different. Like I know it's there, but it doesn't mean a lot to me. But that was one of those times where I was like, wow, that looks so cool. So, and I had to play it, but I wouldn't be able to play it for a number of reasons today. Do you have it now? I've covered for you. Do you have any of those?
Yeah, I'm racking my brain. It's a really good question. I mean, The only thing that comes to mind that is a cop out in a way, because he mentioned it, but I am such a big Metal Gear fan.
Yeah.
And as he mentioned, we've talked about it on the podcast, and I want to always make sure that I caveat my love for the franchise because of the problematic nature of some of it. And I even had some of that problem with Death Stranding, by the way. I think he's still up to his old tricks. Not to diminish it, but he's up to his his bad tricks. And I just it really preoccupies me that nobody is calling him on it, or that people do somewhat, but it doesn't stick, and I guess I don't know, maybe I don't know what impact I would ever have, but maybe I should be more vocal. And so like, for instance, I've considered one of the games that I really would love to stream as an example is Metal Gear Solid 3. Because I really love that game. I think it's the best one, and I would love to stream it, and I think it would be fun for. I think that our listeners would love to play along too, and so because that's not one we'll probably ever play for the podcast, maybe. But
I'll have to send back your copy.
Oh, I probably have multiple copies, but
I'm sure you do.
But one of my hesitations in streaming that game is Eve specifically, that character of Eve, and or Eva. Oh boy, the fans are going.
I think Eva.
It's Eva.
Yeah,
maybe.
I think Eva.
Yeah, but and so and the boss to some degree as well.
Yeah.
They're both good characters, in general, and I think they're strong characters, but the portrayal of them isn't great. So yeah, I mean, again, he gave me the answer because he's put it in the mail, but I really like it. It really bums me out because I'm constantly in having an inner turmoil over that problem.
Well, one thing I'd also point out, I'm going to look this up, is that it's okay to like problematic things, right? It's okay, right? I mean, you can acknowledge that it's problematic and then say, okay, that's okay though, right? I mean, it's not the end of the world. There are things that you like about it. Like I like, a lot of, horror films and things like that, or things, and there are things in that I'm like, okay, I can see why people would like look at the thing that I like and go, ugh.
Yeah.
And it might be the violence in some of them, or, in certain types, there's some types of horror and things that I don't enjoy, but that others do that have specific portrayals of women, like
there's tropes. Yeah.
The revenge trope, the rape revenge trope, especially, is like, ugh, that's pretty gross. You put this character through this just so you could have the big revenge thing. It's just ugh. But you can look at these things that have these, like slasher films, like this is not a great, carefully thought through portrayal of young women, often in a slasher film. And you could say, yep, that's a problem, and still enjoy the things about it that you enjoy. Which might be a jump scare. You might like unsettling music. You just like the feeling you have from that, and you can just identify and say, well, there's something that this gives me that I do enjoy, and I can recognize that is true, while also at the same time saying, yeah, but this other thing's not so good. And that's okay. That's culture, and of course where that line is drawn is going to be different for different people as well, and I think we just have to be a little kinder to each other about things like that. Like, yeah, okay, I'm not going to yuck your yum as far as that goes, right?
Yeah, I think, however, with Kojima specifically, the challenge is that it isn't improving that much. Do you know what I mean? Sure. So it's like, it's still like a present thing. Like, I'm not the only one that uses this example, but because I've heard others say this, but a really clear one for me, to the sort of like, not necessarily justifying or apologizing for it, but with Kojima games, when I was originally playing through the series back, I didn't play them when they came out, but I kind of I came to them late, but played through the whole series when I was still living in California many years ago. And anytime I felt, and I was playing in the living room, anytime I felt uncomfortable if my wife came into the room while I was playing, that was like a sign to me of like, oh yeah, this isn't good. There's like those, so it was sort of like, I was just trying to look through the perspective of others, but I agree with you and I understand what you mean, but there's always that like,
sure,
thinking about it outside of myself. What impact is this having, especially some of the stuff in Metal Gear Solid V that are in Ground Zeroes, specifically the end of Ground Zeroes. Which for those who know what I'm talking about, so it's like, anyway. Yeah, it's a good heavy topic. My wife and I talk about it a lot with filmmakers as well, right? Especially the pretty obvious ones out there. So
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I'll tackle one just to get through another one tonight. So we make cut into our mountain of email a little bit, as it were. This one is Simple Games for Simple Devs from Jarko Civula. Jarko's written before, and I still don't know how to pronounce his name. He says, and I don't think this one has a question. He says, thank you for covering old games like Rogue and helping me understand what makes simple things really click and engage the player. It's fun to hear about 5-star modern classics like Dark Souls, but most helpful seem to be these episodes that really break down simple but clever mechanics from old games. I'm into the last phase of making my first game. Congrats.
Wow.
It's pretty. Yep. It's a pretty basic adventure made with RPG Maker. Some would say, this is in parentheses, some would say you can't even make a real game with that kid's toy. I disagree. Your recent episodes have really helped me think about what is fun in my game, what isn't, and how to increase the fun and use the strengths of the old-fashioned presentation and systems. It's pretty awesome how much you can do with just multiple layers of if, then, else. I'm probably switching from RPG Maker to Unity or Godot for my next project, but I have to still keep things clear and simple. It's not possible to compete with cinematic fireworks of Uncharted as a casual solo dev. Thank you again. Hopefully your future game choices are as inspirational, whether older or newer. Jarko Sabula. Yeah, and that's part, I sort of had this email in mind a little bit talking about, the work on Dwarf Fortress over the course of 20 years, or if I were to start as side project, that was just me for 20 years, like what I might end up with. I probably won't do that because in 20 years I'll be too old to code. My fingers will have curled up into little balls, and from all my knuckle cracking I do. But I'll just be reading all the time while people bring me coffee. I may just imagined a future for myself. But
just live. You heard it, folks. It's happening.
Congrats on finishing your first game. That's great. You should send me a link when you're there. I'm glad people are out there doing stuff. I actually, and to RPG Maker specifically, I think it's a great place for expression, and I think those sorts of tools are terrific for that. And because they, do a lot of things for you, it allows you to think about the ways that you can push it, or subvert it, or what have you. I'm pretty sure Menichi, which is a game about the trans experience by I'll put it in the show notes. It's getting late for me. It just went. It was there and it went. The artist who made it. Anyway, now I got to look it up because I just don't want to.
Well, I will add while you're looking it up as a bit of a covering for you the
Matty Bryce. God. Okay.
Oh yeah, right. That rings a bell. Yep. Well, I mean, like whatever. Like the naysayers on any tool, like don't worry about it. Don't listen to them.
Don't worry about it.
I don't know if many of you saw the article, but I read this week, there was a game recently, indie game released recently that was, I think it was maybe a point and click adventure. Yeah, it definitely was a point and click adventure made in PowerPoint.
Amazing.
And the art style is like very old school. I'll say what's a good example? Like Sierra, kind of like Sierra era,
Sierra style,
yeah, and it's just
early ones, yeah,
and it's just like, yes, that's amazing, that, and when you think about it, like, yeah, of course you could do that in PowerPoint to some degree because it's basically flowcharts and things, but with hyperlinks and such, but it's graphical. I mean, I didn't see any text on screen, so I've been meaning to go and check that out. But like, you can do it you can pen and paper. You can make an RPG, so it's like,
yep,
yeah, that's awesome.
Yep,
good for you. And congrats. That is like it's a monumentous event.
Yeah, terrific. Well, good luck, Jarko. Like I said, send it my way. I'll take a quick look. Depending on how long it is. If it's an RPG with hundreds of hours,
you'll definitely play it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I might get sucked in and play all of it. You never know. Anyway, thanks for those. We have more to get to, including a singing review. You can send us those at devgameclub@gmail.com. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com or on Twitter at devgameclub, where you can sometimes also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
I don't know if you're returning to streaming this week or not, but you can also find him at twitch.tv/Tim Longo Jr. That I presume is coming back someday.
It will come. It will someday. But as Brett knows, we are knee deep. We are knee deep in it right now. So.
We're busy.
it's not going to happen.
We appreciate the patience with the occasional outages on the podcast because we are super busy. We also have a Discord. Go to that Twitter and find it and ask me for a link if there isn't one that's current, but there should be. We're at like 90 people now. We're growing. It's great
awesome. Thank you, everybody.
It's fun. I drop in. I'm in there most days just to say hello or respond to things that are going on. But they're having all their own discussions as well. It's a great little community. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and our logo, our merch store, also linked on the Twitter, and the administration of that Discord with others is by Mark Garcia. Have fun dining on plump helmets this week, and good night.
Good night.
I had to go with that. It sounded so dirty.
Yeah, really. Yikes.
Oh, boy.